Have you ever had a secret you were too ashamed to tell? A truth so heavy it felt like a physical weight on your chest, one that would break you if you said it out loud? For years, Tom and I kept ours. We told everyone we were fine, but we weren't. We were drowning. I remember standing at a neighbor's barbecue, laughing and nodding as they talked about their new boat. I was smiling, but all I could think about was the single can of tuna. Tom and I would be sharing for dinner that night because that was all we could afford. The shame was a constant, bitter taste in my mouth. But that wasn't the moment I broke. That came later. And it wasn't even about money. For 30 years, we had a silent partner in our marriage. It was our 401k. It wasn't just an account. It was our quiet protector, our financial fairy godmother who was supposed to guard our future. Every contribution was a brick in the fortress that would protect our golden years. We had a calendar with a date circled in red. Retirement. It was a promise of mornings with no alarm clocks, of trips we'd only seen in magazines, of time, real, unhurried time, with our grandkids. But in 2008, we learned that our trusted protector was a phantom. We watched that fortress, which we believed was built of stone, turn to dust. Have you ever seen a photograph of someone you loved catch fire? You watch the edges curl, the faces blacken and disappear into smoke. That's what it felt like. I watched our life curl into ash, frame by frame, watching a lifetime of work, of sacrifice, of careful planning, just vanish. This isn't just our story about losing money. It's about losing faith and the long, hard road to finding a different kind of security. It started out like most stories do, with love and a lot of optimism. Tom and I met in our early 20s, just two kids with more dreams than dollars. Our first apartment was tiny. I remember the smell of burned toast on Sunday mornings and drinking coffee from mismatched mugs we'd found at garage sales. But it was ours. And in that tiny kitchen, over cheap spaghetti, we sketched out the blueprint for our life on a napkin. I remember Tom gently brushing a strand of hair from my face, his touch a silent promise. That rickety kitchen table would later become the scene of our greatest hopes and our deepest sorrows. We came from a generation that believed in hard work and delayed gratification. You put your head down, you saved your money, and you'd get your reward. The day we were eligible for our company 401k plans felt like a rite of passage. It felt like we were finally grown-ups. The message was always the same. Invest in a mix of mutual funds, contribute every paycheck, and let the magic of compound interest do the rest. The 401k, they told us, was the key. I remember for our 10th anniversary, we talked about a fancy dinner downtown, but the quarterly statements had just arrived. Instead, we stayed home, filled out the paperwork to increase our contribution, and ate macaroni and cheese. "This is better than any dinner," Tom said. "This is for us, for Italy." We told ourselves those weren't sacrifices. They were investments. The years flew by. We bought that house we dreamed of. We filled it with the laughter of two amazing kids. I remember one summer evening, Tom held up a fishing magazine. "One day, Sarah," he said, "I'm going to teach our grandkids how to fish from a little boat, right at sunrise." That dream was so real, we could almost feel the morning chill. And all along, the fortress grew. Once a quarter, the statements would show up. Opening them became our little ritual at that same kitchen table, a much bigger one by then. We watched the balance climb, feeling like geniuses during the dot-com boom. We'd whisper about buying a little stone cottage in France. I remember us almost buying a ridiculously expensive bottle of wine to celebrate a market high, but at the last second, we put it back. Tom just smiled and said, "That's another stone for our cottage." We laughed at our own innocent arrogance. We had a financial planner who'd pat us on the back and say, "You're doing great. Just stay the course." But we were about to learn that even the most solid-looking ground can crack right under your feet. And what we didn't know yet would change everything. The first tremors were easy to ignore. In 2007, the news started filling up with strange terms like subprime mortgages. It sounded like Wall Street jargon, a background hum of concern that had nothing to do with us on Main Street. But that hum got louder. By early 2008, the market started to stutter. Our planner's advice was the same old song. Stay the course. It's just market volatility. We'd been through downturns before, but this felt different. Bear Stearns collapsed. The words bailout and meltdown were suddenly everywhere. The nightly news was no longer background noise. It was the main event. "Maybe we should just pull it out, Tom," I whispered one night. "All of it." He shook his head, his jaw tight. "And do what?" "Lock in the loss?" The advisor said to stay the course. "We have to trust the plan. If only we had known. If only I had pushed harder. That single decision would haunt our nights for years to come." In September 2008, the floor fell out. Lehman Brothers filed for bankruptcy. It felt like a personal violation. We thought we'd hit rock bottom until the statement came in October. I remember Tom bringing in the mail. He saw the envelope from our investment company and he just froze. His hand, holding the rest of the mail, started to tremble. He placed it on the kitchen counter like it was a bomb, his breath catching in his throat. We stood there forever, just staring at it. Finally, I picked it up. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. The sound of the paper tearing was deafening in the silence. I unfolded the pages, my eyes scanning past the letter, searching for that one number at the bottom. The ink looked blurry, even before the tears came. My inner voice started chanting, "This must be a mistake. This has to be a mistake." And there it was, 30%. 30% of our life savings had evaporated in 3 months. In that instant, I saw the ghosts of our sacrifices, the anniversary dinner of macaroni and cheese, the pin we'd proudly placed on Italy, the imaginary stone cottage in France, all of it turning to headstones in a graveyard of dreams. Tom's shoulders slumped as he leaned over to look. We stood there in the kitchen, in the ruins of our fortress, with a hollow, sick feeling. It felt like we'd been robbed, but there was no one to call. But the number on the page wasn't the worst part. The worst part came after, when the silence between us turned to ice. We stopped eating breakfast at the kitchen table together. It was too full of ghosts. We started talking through closed doors, our voices muffled and distant. The crash was a shock, but the aftermath was a chronic illness. The market finally hit bottom in early 2009, but our pain was just beginning. Tom, who dreamed of trading his briefcase for a fishing rod, had to shelve that dream indefinitely. Our life became about cutting back, but the psychological toll was heavier. A deep sense of failure settled over our home like a cold, damp fog. We had done everything right, and we still lost. The feeling was covered in a thick layer of shame, so we kept it a secret. I'd be scrolling on my phone and see friends posting photos from their retirement cruise to Alaska, and I'd have to lock myself in the bathroom to stop from screaming. A friend of ours, Maria, lost her house after following her advisor's advice. She'd trusted him with everything. Then one day the checks just stopped coming. We saw her pain and felt our own. The isolation was crushing. Once, I hid a past-due utility bill under a pile of junk mail, only for Tom to find it days later. He just placed it on my nightstand without a word, and the silence that followed was worse than any argument. The shame made us strangers in our own home. Our marriage started to show cracks. One afternoon, I was washing dishes and my favorite coffee mug, one we'd had for 20 years, slipped from my hand and shattered. I just stared at the pieces, and then I started to sob. In the quiet that followed, I could almost hear an echo of Tom's laugh from years ago, back when this house was full of hope. It made the silence now feel so much sharper. The next day at work, I overheard a young coworker talking to another about the magic of compound interest. I felt a bitterness rise in my throat that was so hot, I had to walk away. That night, I stood in front of our travel map on the wall. I remembered the day we put the pin on Italy on our 25th anniversary, promising each other we'd go. My hand was shaking as I slowly reached up and pulled it out. The dream was officially over. I didn't cry. I just stood there, letting the silence swallow me. For 2 years, we lived in that fog of grief. The turning point wasn't a dramatic moment, but a quiet surrender at the kitchen table. The silence was heavy. I finally looked at Tom and said, my voice cracking, "I can't do this anymore. I can't live with this ghost between us." He was quiet for a long time. I could almost hear my own heartbeat in the stillness. Then he reached across the table, the worn, familiar texture of his hand covering mine for the first time in what felt like months. There was a pause, a breath, before he looked at me, his eyes full of the same exhaustion I felt, and whispered, "Me neither." That was the beginning. We put all our cards on the table. We talked about our fears, our failure, and our anger. We were a team again. We started educating ourselves with the skepticism of survivors. The biggest lesson hit us like a ton of bricks. We had fallen for the myth of the single basket. Real diversification means owning different types of assets, stocks, bonds, real estate, cash, that don't all go down at once. We started rebuilding, stone by painful stone. We made a budget together. We even attended a free financial literacy workshop at the local library, sitting side by side, taking notes. I remember looking around the crowded library room and realizing we weren't alone. There were other couples, their faces etched with the same worry as ours. We weren't the only ones. For the first time, the shame loosened its grip, just a little. It was slow, frustrating work, like trying to plant a garden in rocky soil. I actually started a small potted tomato plant on our porch, a tiny act of hope. There was a week where it wilted, and I thought I'd lost it. But I kept watering it, and one morning, a tiny new green leaf appeared. I remember touching it and thinking, maybe there was still something in me that could grow too. One day, the car broke down. A year ago, that would have sent us into a spiral of panic. But Tom just looked at me and said, "It's okay. We have the money in the emergency fund." He brought home flowers that weekend, not for any special occasion, but because we had hit our first small savings goal. That small, hard-earned win felt more empowering than any stock market gain ever had. If our story is resonating with you, if you're worried about your own retirement, take a second to subscribe and hit that notification bell. You don't have to feel this alone. We see you. We are you. You don't have to feel ashamed. You're not the only one who did everything right and still lost. We're sharing these hard lessons so that maybe you don't have to learn them the way we did. So, where are we today? We didn't get the retirement we spent 30 years dreaming about. There's no RV. The world map has fewer pins. Our retirement is more modest. It's simpler. But in a strange way, it's richer. We lost our money, but found a different kind of wealth. Our relationship, tested by fire, is stronger than ever. Our security isn't a number on a statement we can't control. It's based on the wisdom we earned. Our old fortress was built of paper and promises. This new one is hand-built from the wreckage. It's scarred, and because of that, it's stronger. It's a fortress of wisdom. Sometimes now, Tom and I just sit at that same kitchen table, the one that saw our blueprints and our bankruptcy, and just share a quiet cup of coffee. It's a bookend to our story, and that's something no market crash can ever tear down. The last, most unexpected lesson was this: joy isn't a prize waiting at the finish line. It's the stubborn sunlight that finds a way to break through the rubble. It's our granddaughter handing us a crayon drawing of our family, or the sound of her laughter as she helps me water that same tomato plant, now heavy with fruit. It's in the shared cup of coffee, the walk with our grandkids, the quiet peace of being together. What part of your own dream are you too afraid to say out loud? What advice do you wish you'd gotten sooner? Please share your own experiences or questions in the comments below. Watch this next for another gripping tale of retirement gone wrong, plus the lesson you can't afford to miss.